Lord Jesus Christ. Sometimes I'm in teaching mode and sometimes I'm in preaching mode. Today I'm in teaching mode, and when I'm in teaching mode, I like to teach from here. When I preach from there because there's no holding me back. Okay, it's better I preach from here, right? Okay. Jesus was making his final journey towards Jerusalem. And I don't want you to take this lightly. The Gospel of Matthew, from which we read today's Gospel, describes Jesus' ministry as a purposeful journey towards Jerusalem. Jesus was purposefully and decisively and intentionally moving towards Jerusalem. It's not that he didn't go to Jerusalem before. He was there with his parents at the Passover. And then at the temptation, in one of the temptations, we find him at the parapet wall of the temple. Most of Jesus' ministry was in the Galilee area. But that does not mean that it was a purposeless gathering, a wandering. Jesus' entire ministry, even as he ministered in Galilee, was an intentional, purposeful, and divisive movement towards Jerusalem, where his life and God's plan for salvation would move towards a decisive climax. It is there that he would also meet his end. The Transfiguration happened right before he entered Jerusalem for the last time. And that's the context for this whole thing. Now, this passage that we have, I want to do a little exegesis because it is so loaded with meaning that if we miss those little details, we kind of miss what's going on. So let me say about 4 things about this passage as a way of exegesis. Matthew says, this is the first. Matthew says, after 6 days, Jesus took after 6 days, not 7, not 5, not 12, after 6 days. Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain. Not to the seashore, not to the lake, but up a high mountain. So first 6 days. That's not just a timeline. 6 days was how long Moses was on Mount Sinai before the Lord called out to him. Second, that Jesus led the disciples up a high mountain is not just a geographical detail. God called Moses up Mount Sinai, and it was there that God's greatest and most profound revelation took place, when God also gave him the 10 Commandments. Third, when Jesus was transfigured, Moses and Elijah were found conversing with him. Not any other figures, but Moses and Elijah. Moses, let him finish. Please feel welcome, parents. Please feel welcome. I'm saying this seriously. Please feel very welcome. You're loved and your child. Okay. Third, so when Jesus was figured, Moses and Elijah were found conversing with him. Why Moses and Elijah? Moses represented the law. Elijah represented the prophets. Their appearance together meant that Jesus is being presented as the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. But there is an even greater revelation that surpasses all these 3 points. Just like it happened on Sinai, once again, a bright cloud cast a shadow over the mountain and the disciples. Then a voice spoke to the disciples in the same way that that God spoke to Moses. The voice said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him." If at Sinai, God revealed the law, on the Transfiguration mountain, God revealed his beloved Son, Jesus the Christ. So let's connect all this to Jesus' journey towards Jerusalem. Jesus took Peter, James, and John up the mountain because he would soon be facing his suffering and his death. Before this happened, God revealed Jesus' identity, his glory, indeed God's entire plan of salvation to his closest disciples. Why only Peter, James, and John? Because for some reason, these were the 3 who were Jesus' most trusted. Perhaps the others were not yet ready for this revelation. Now, this revelation would have implications for the disciples, and it has implications for us. And that's where I'm going to go with my homily next. The 3 practical implications for us from the Transfiguration of Jesus. First, the Transfiguration is primarily a revelation event. It tells us that Jesus, who came as the incarnate Word, is indeed God. Just as God's revelation to Moses on Sinai revealed God, the Transfiguration reveals Jesus and the full meaning of Jesus' life and ministry. It tells us that our redemption lies in this simple yet unfathomable truth. And this is what I want us to hear. If you forget the rest of the homily, fine. But here is what this revelation is. That God shared our humanity so that we might share in God's divinity. So the practical implication for us is this, that we must let the revelation of Jesus as Messiah become integral to the goal, the meaning, the purpose of our lives. If Jesus became human so that human might become divine, then our daily life must be lived towards this call. Jesus must become an inalienable part of our lives. Every moment, every day, every breath must become part of this call. In this lies redemption. Secondly, the Transfiguration account inspires us to reflect on our own life journey. Folks, I hope we are not just wandering. Christian discipleship is about moving towards our own Jerusalem. See, Jesus was intentionally, decisively, purposefully moving towards Jerusalem. We are not an aimless people. We are not a purposeless people. We are called towards our own Jerusalem. And there is a key to this intentionality. It comes from becoming part of the Jesus story. And hear me very, very carefully on this. The intentionality of our lives comes from becoming part of the Jesus story. Often, we try to fit Jesus into our story. When we try to fit Jesus into our story, we want to lead Jesus where we want to go. It's like the disciples who wanted to stay on the top of the mountain, and they wanted Jesus to stay with them. They were trying to make Jesus part of their thinking, of their plan. But on that day, they had to learn something. Christian discipleship is not about making Jesus part of our story. Rather, Christian discipleship is becoming part of the Jesus story. Christian discipleship is to follow wherever he leads, even down the mountain, all the way to the cross. And finally, there is a very touching, emotional, beautiful, tender part of this gospel reading and this account of the Transfiguration. When the disciples heard the voice from the cloud, they were afraid. At this, Jesus came, touched them, he spoke to them, and he said, "Rise up. Do not be afraid." Even though Jesus had just participated in the very glory of God, he does not lose his humanity. He touched the fearful disciples. He reassured them and comforted them. And then he walked ahead of them as he led them down the mountain to live the rest of their lives with him. Folks, the practical implication is this: as we try to live our lives meaningfully and purposefully, as we take on ourselves the task of following Christ, letting him lead, as we move towards Jerusalem, we realize that Christian discipleship is no easy task. We too can be afflicted by fear, confronted by uncertainty, and confounded by the complexities of life. In these moments, Jesus comes to us. He touches us. And he says to us, "Rise and do not be afraid." And then he himself walks ahead of us. He reassures us. He comforts us and becomes the very meaning of our lives. The same Jesus who was transfigured is with us today on this altar. As we receive Christ, body, soul, divinity, let us make him part of our lives in a way that we follow him. That we who are human may get into our entire goal and purpose, the task of becoming divine like him. That we become part of the Jesus story as we move with him towards our own Jerusalems. One day, may we stand face to face with Christ and encounter the glory that the disciples encountered on the mountain of the Transfiguration. In this would be our redemption. People of God said,